Right, so I'm Justine Cherry. I'm an assistant professor in CSD. You may think that that means that I know something about AI, but in fact, I do not. I am a computer systems professor and I work on the internet. So I teach a class on how the internet works, from everything from like the cables that run across the globe to the servers that offer like services like Facebook and Netflix. This is an upper division course, so the students already know how to program. They know a lot of CS fundamentals, and so our learning goals are a little bit more sophisticated than a typical intro CS class. We're really asking students to apply these skills to a new domain and reason about how they can use their programming and analytical skills to build systems for the internet. Um, there are three key assessments in this course. The largest assessment are these programming projects that they do over the course of several weeks. They do them in partners, and they're really they build a web server, they build routers, they write code to build the components that make up the internet for real. And then there's also a little bit more of book learning. The way that I approach this is my homework is extremely low stakes. Students are encouraged to ask lots of questions. I tell the TAs that it's totally fine to tell a student in office hours, that's not correct. Here's the thing you're missing. And to sort of assess whether or not students actually have learned the book material, we have a midterm and final where the students are not allowed to use the textbook or the internet. They have to really show on their own that they've learned it, given that they've seen very similar project problems in the homework. So just given that context, last fall, me and apparently 400 other people at the university were wondering what should our generative AI policy be for the course. And so as I was working through the options, most of my colleagues were saying you should just ban it. That means you don't need to change any of your expectations about project difficulty or how long it'll take to complete the projects. It's easier to reason about what students know versus what they got from the AI. Some concerns were that there was a potential for increase in academic integrity violations as students would use generative AI anyway. And then I had the concern actually that there would be a lost opportunity for learning and efficiency gains for students. In particular, because my homeworks are so flexible in, there really is no academic integrity policy whatsoever. They're there to help the students learn. I thought that the AI might be a good way for students to check or test their answers. And for those programming assignments, which are big and beefy, I've had the feedback in the past that my course takes too much time. And these are not intro programming students. These are senior level students. And it turns out that the thing that automatic code generation is good at is this sort of boilerplate, very basic stuff that these students definitely already know how to do. And so my hypothesis was that if I allowed students to use generative AI for the projects, they might spend less time on the projects, but they would spend more time on the more sophisticated junior, senior, master's level thinking about the project, and less time on the boilerplate stuff that they really already learned how to do in intro programming. Nonetheless, there's still some concerns, the students actually learn, or will they use these tools to avoid my learning goals? And I was also concerned that students who are more AI savvy or more confident in their use of AI would unfairly benefit, and other students might be at a disadvantage. So the problem with all of these things is that I didn't really know how to reason about whether or not any of these pros or cons are real. They were all hypothesized. So the solution that we came up with was that we would just set up an experiment in my own class to evaluate these questions. So the key questions that we came up with, and this was a joint collaboration between me and some folks at Eberly, was how does generative AI use correlate with time spent on assignments in class? I mentioned that those programming assignments are beefy. On average, students last year spent 18 hours a week on my 12-unit course, which got me in trouble with my department chair. So maybe generative AI would help students get through those tasks a little bit more quickly. How does generative AI use correlate with grade outcomes? In particular, since I'm allowing the students to use generative AI for the homework, we can then test what they actually learned on the exams. And then does generative AI use impact students of different demographic backgrounds similarly or differently? And this was something that I don't have access to the data for, but folks at Eberly do if I collaborate with them through their IRB policy. So I'm running short on time, but the key idea is that students were asked to give a survey after every project. I gave open day, open field to just use generative AI however they wanted. They had to answer questions about how they used it, if they did use it, or if they didn't use it. They had to tell me how much time they spent, what kinds of tools they used, how they used those tools, and give their own self-assessment about how that helped learning and time outcomes. The status is that I have a lot of data, but I have no results. The only thing that I can tell you so far is only about 20% of students reported using generative AI, which I thought was somewhat curious. I thought more would be using it. But I wonder if some of my students are skeptical of generative AI as a tool to help them, maybe because they know that it sometimes hallucinates, or maybe because they know that they ultimately do need to know the material, and so they don't want a cheat code to get out of that. Anecdotally, my midterm scores were historically high, so the students seem to be learning what I want them to. And the TAs haven't really raised any issues about generative AI. So next steps is to analyze the data. And I'm 42 seconds over. I'm so sorry.